Arguably the most famous Viking warrior was the semi-legendary sea king, Ragnar Lothbrok, Ragnar Lothbrok in Old Norse, who supposedly led raids along England's coast. Ambiguity pervades much of what is thought to be known about Ragnar Lothbrok. Many, if not all, of his adventures are mythical, with Lothbrok's life largely passing into legend in medieval European literature, created long after his death through the Icelandic sagas. These were based on real people and events, yet also somewhat embellished and partly made up. Lothbrok's many 9th century raids on Francia, Anglo-Saxon England and Ireland earned him a prominent role in them. So what is actually known about Ragnar Lothbrok, and how can we separate historical fact from fiction? There is debate about whether Ragnar existed. Legends claim Lothbrok was the son of a Swedish king Sigurd Ring and a Norwegian princess. However, the Vikings didn't keep a written record of their history at the time. Many of the Icelandic sagas were written centuries after Ragnar Lothbrok's time, causing debate and doubt amongst historians over his true existence. Some argue that stories of Lothbrok may well have been based on a variety of historical figures that were tied together into one hero, built on the reputation of the Ragnar. It's likely the Icelandic sagas likely contain some truth regarding his life, but whilst it can be difficult to determine fact from fiction in these stories, some instances of fantasy are more obvious than others, such as tales of Lothbrok strangling a bear to death or fighting a giant snake, sometimes depicted as a dragon, though there is some evidence that he did exist. This form of storytelling started orally, before stories were eventually written down to preserve and spread the tales. The main source telling of Lothbrok's life and heroic deeds in the Icelandic sagas is the 13th century Icelandic The Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok. Other sagas mentioning him include Heimskringla-Skubrit, Tale of Ragnar's Sons, and Hervarar Saga. Interestingly, Lothbrok is also mentioned in the Danish document Gesta Danorum, which contains historical information referring to his marriages to Lagertha and Thora as well as legends, compiled by the historian Saxo Grammaticus. Unlike the Icelandic sagas, the Gesta Danorum is known to be a fairly accurate geographic breakdown of Viking rule. One of the most significant pieces of evidence mentioning Lothbrok as a real historical figure is from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a 9th century English document, also generally thought reliable. There are two references to a particularly eminent Viking raider in 840 AD, Ragnar and Reginhirus, both considered to be Lothbrok. The fact that other historical documents outside Viking culture at this time also mention Lothbrok by name serves to corroborate his existence and activity to an extent. He had at least 3 wives. It is generally agreed Lothbrok married at least 3 women. His first wife, Lagertha, was a Nordic shield maiden who fought with Lothbrok as warriors in Norway when he was avenging the death of his grandfather, Fro, despite once allegedly attacking him with a hound and bear that guarded her home. She eventually became Lothbrok's wife. Viking legend says that Lothbrok had to slay a giant snake to win his second wife, Thora. His third wife, Aslaug, was said to be the daughter of legendary dragon slayer, Sigurd, and the shield maiden, Brynhildr. Lothbrok asked her a riddle during their courtship, and proposed to her soon after, charmed by her clever response. The tales of Ragnar's wives may well have been the result of an attempt to combine 3 separate legends. Danish history includes mention of a possible 4th wife, Swanloga. His nickname was Hairy Breeches or Shaggy Breeches. This derives from Lothbrok allegedly boiling his cowhide trousers in tar, which he claimed protected him from the snake or dragon, according to some sources, whilst winning his second wife Thora's hand in marriage. He had several sons, many of whom have been verified as genuine historical figures. While the fantastic stories about Lothbrok can be hard to verify, There is evidence to prove that his sons might have been real historical figures. Significantly more evidence exists about their authenticity than Lothbrok himself, with many living in the same places and times as the references made about them. The sons claim to be Lothbrok's direct offspring, giving further historical context to Lothbrok himself. Indeed, a Viking warrior called Bjorn, probably Bjorn Ironside, a skillful naval commander, is known to have raided the area around Paris in 857–59. Additionally, Ivar the Boneless and Ob were among the leaders of the Great Heathen Army. Ivar is recorded as having died in Dublin in 873, and Ob to have been killed in battle in Devon in 878. Along with Halfdan Ragnarsson, all are genuine figures. Historical accounts from conquered peoples verify their existence and activity. A reference to Bjorn Ironside by Norman historian William of Jumiges in 1070 also named a Danish king, Lothbrok, as Bjorn's father. A few years later, chronicler Adam of Bremen referenced Ivar, cruelest of Norse warriors, as another of Lothbrok's sons. Nevertheless, we don't know for certain whether these references were about the same Ragnar Lothbrok. The first reference to record the names Ragnar and Lothbrok together was Icelandic scholar Ari Orgilsson, writing between 1120 to 1133, claiming that Ivar, son of Ragnar Lothbrok, had been the one to kill Edmund of East Anglia. Other Vikings claiming to be sons of Lothbrok included Hvitserk, Fridleif, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. It's hard to know whether these historical figures were related to Lothbrok by blood, especially as at the time, warriors often claimed lineage to legendary figures to enhance their own status. Viking men also sometimes adopted younger men to appoint as their successors. Lothbrok himself claimed to be a direct descendant of Odin. He tended to favor blitzkrieg-style tactics. Like other Vikings, several sources note how Lothbrok used blitzkrieg-like tactics. These terrorized, demoralized, and overwhelmed his opponents before they could gather a strong enough force to oppose him. He also only fought when the odds were in his favor. He is said to have laid siege to Paris. A Danish Viking leader, Regin Harry, is one figure that Lothbrok might be based on. Regin Harry is said to have raided the coasts of France, culminating in an attack and siege of Paris in 845. Charles the Bold had assembled his army into two parts on either side of the river Seine. Lothbrok therefore simply attacked the smaller army, wiping it out in full view of their other comrades. The French didn't wish to deal with another conflict as they had more important worries to contend with. So Charles the Bold reportedly paid Ragnar's fleets off with 7,000 levs of silver, round to 0.5 tons. However, Frankish chronicles report that Lothbrok was defeated, with him and his men dying from disease, though Danish records state that he went on to pillage the Irish coast and began a settlement near Dublin, until his death in the mid-late 50s. He was used as a form of propaganda. Some literature of the time was written as political propaganda by exaggerating the threat Lothbrok posed. It made any victory against him seem more impressive. Later, the sagas stated that the mere mention of Ragnar Lothbrok's name could spread fear among his enemies. Once dead and his abilities no longer a threat, tales of Lothbrok's mighty fighting prowess grew even stronger, further mythologizing his deeds and inadvertently adding ambiguity to the line between fact and fiction. There are debates over the manner of his death. According to Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus Gestidanorum, after several raids in the northwest of England, Ragnar was eventually captured by Anglo-Saxon King Law of Northumbria and thrown into a snake pit to die. During his death, Lothbrok is quoted as saying how the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers, foretelling the revenge his sons would wreak. He is also said to have recalled previous victories and looked forward to the prospect of entering a great feasting hall for slain Viking warriors after his death, the Valhalla. although this story is also recounted in the later Icelandic works Ragnar's Saga Lobrkr and Tdraf Ragnarssonum. Other historians believe Ragnar Lothbrok died sometime between 850 to 856 during a storm on one of his voyages along the Irish Sea whilst pillaging the coasts of Ireland. His sons left a lasting impact on Britain. Lothbrok's death became an incentive to rouse many of his sons to align and establish a unified front with other Norse warriors against England. This great heathen army of approximately 4,000 men at a time, when armies usually numbered near hundreds, landed in England in 865, where they killed Edmund the Martyr and later King Law, marking the start of Viking occupation in parts of England. Like and follow to see more.